Hey guys and girls, I'm back. Today I bring to you the long-awaited How to Get Into Insert School Here, Part 2. I know this video took a long time to come out, but after I filmed Part 1, I graduated high school, I had a summer vacation where I did a ton of stuff, and I had to get ready to go to college, so sorry. But I'm right here, right now, a few months before private school applications are due, to give you a few tips about essays. Also, ignore the lighting. I'm not a big shot YouTuber. I don't have my own lights. I'm using natural lighting from my window, and so this is what happens. Sorry about it. I have 8 main tips for you guys that I kept in mind while I was trying to write my private school essays. My first tip about writing the private school essays is to sit down alone in your room somewhere you're comfortable, hit the record button on your phone, and just talk. Talk about anything that comes to mind about yourself, about your experiences in high school, about anything that you think you might want to mention in your essay, you just don't know how. Just sit there and record yourself talking about that. Because for me, when I found that I talked about the first things that came to mind, I found that I was able to be a little bit more genuine than if I was writing an essay. For the past 17 years, you've been told to write an essay and sound as smart as possible. So when you're writing your personal essay, you may come off sounding academic, which is why I suggest talking it out first so that your personal voice can come through. If you record yourself, you can type exactly what you just said, and then your personal voice will really come through because it's literally your voice. Tip number 3, try to be unique, but also you gotta be honest. Don't embellish to make yourself sound better than you actually are, because everyone's going to be able to tell if you're not telling the truth. One way to make yourself sound unique while still being truthful is to look at your story from a different perspective. You gotta search through your life and find the things that are a little bit different and a little bit out of the norm. Trust me, they're there because not everyone is living the same life. You have something unique to you that you can put on paper and still be honest about. Although that tip may seem obvious, it's very important not to lie. The 4th tip. Ask yourself why and how a bunch of time. Go back to thinking about what's really important to you and what you want to write about. And then ask yourself why. If you want to talk about your love for learning languages, ask yourself, why do you love learning languages? Ask yourself, how did you become interested in languages? Because those questions can lead you to a story about yourself that you may not have thought about. In one of my Stanford essays, I wrote about how much I loved being a musician and performing. And I asked myself, why? Well, I like being on stage. Why do I like being on stage? Because I feel like I can be a role model. And then that brought me back to a time when I was performing and I saw a little girl in the crowd and I felt like I was being a role model for her. I was able to write a story from that rather than just telling the admissions officers, I like to perform. You want to be able to get to the core purpose of why you do the things that you do in life, and you want to be able to relate that to the admissions officers so they can have a better understanding of you and a better understanding of whether or not you'll fit into their school. Number 5. I feel it's important for me to include this tip because I was actually told the opposite many times. If you have a sob story, don't be afraid to write about it. That's only if it's essential to who you are. When I was in your shoes and I was looking up how to write essays for a certain school, time after time, they would say, do not write a sob story. Everyone has a sob story. And while everyone goes through struggle in life, for some people, the level of sob story that they go through may be a little bit more essential to their character. For example, if one of your parents passed away, that's probably really relevant in your everyday life, and you could consider writing about that. But if I don't know, your dog died when you were 3, that's probably not going to have an effect on the way that your life is now. Take a second to think about your sob story. If it would have made a significant difference in your life if it hadn't happened, then go ahead and write about it. If not, then take a step back and think of something else to write about. Tip 6. Use your essays as an opportunity to go into specifics about your hobbies and interests. In the short answer part of your application, you get to write about your hobbies, but they don't give you a lot of space to go into detail. In fact, you shouldn't be going into very much detail at all. That's what the essays are for. Details are super important for distinguishing yourself between other applicants. In the short answer part of my application, I put that I was in an orchestra for 5 or so years. Think about how many thousands of other people were also in an orchestra for 5 years. The trick is to go into details. In my essays, I made sure to mention that I got into my orchestra by audition. I also made sure to mention that it was from a very large pool of people and only 80 people were selected to be in the orchestra, period. I also mentioned a lot of the things we did, the community service we were able to do through music, the traveling we got to do to perform for disadvantaged kids. I made sure to share the unique parts of that orchestral experience because my experience in orchestra was a lot different than someone who was maybe in orchestra for 5 years, but it was a community band, you didn't really have to audition, and that person only showed up like once a month. If I had just wrote down that I was in an orchestra for 5 years and I didn't put any details, then the admissions officer wouldn't have a way to differentiate between me, who put a ton of effort in, and that figurative person who didn't put any effort in. Use those details and brag a little to set yourself apart from people who may be doing the same things that you're doing. Number 7. You've probably heard this a bunch, but I'm going to say it again because it's super important. Have your counselors read your essays. Do not just submit something that you typed up and didn't have anyone proofread, because for all you know, even if it makes sense to you, it might not make sense to someone else. Also, your counselors are professional. They help kids get into college every year, but it is important to trust yourself. There were a few little embellishments that I had put into my essays to make them a bit more poetic that my counselor told me to take out. In the end, right before submitting my essays, I decided to put them back in because it made me feel like I was putting in a piece of myself that was important to me, the more poetic and flowery part. So in the end, it's important to listen to yourself and trust yourself, but also your counselor is a professional, so they probably know what's best for you. But on the little things, it's up to you. My final tip is tip number 8. So one thing that I struggled with a lot when I was writing my essays is reading other people's to get ideas. We all heard about the girl last year who wrote her essay about Costco and got into like Harvard or something. I'm not even sure. It was some good school. It might have been Stanford. But she wrote about Costco, which is really quirky and different, and of course it made her stand out. And you may think, well, I have to write something super weird and unique in order to get into these schools. Nah, that's not the case. My final tip is to not let other people's essays fool you. You do not have to be quirky. Just type up how you feel and you're going to be fine. None of my essays had a gimmick. They were all just honest pieces of me that I wanted to share, and the admissions officers recognized that. It wasn't the fact that that girl wrote about Costco that got her in. What matters is that the people who get in are able to express things that were important to them through those essays. It's not about how you write it, it's about what you write. Point blank. Don't get fooled. All in all, it's important that you don't stress yourself out over these essays. They are one of the most difficult and stressful parts, but just be you and speak from your heart and it's all going to work out. Don't forget that if you pour your heart out and you're proud of the work that you put in, it doesn't matter if the college doesn't accept you, because that's not where you belonged in the first place. That's not where you want to be if they're not going to take you as you are. that's it for this video. I really hoped I was able to help with the essays. I know this was a long time coming, and I was able to get it out before this application cycle was through, so I really hope it helped you. If you're a senior right now, stop watching this video, go write your essays, get it done. I know you want to procrastinate, but just go do it. If you have any more questions, make sure to put it down in the comments. If you put that your class of 2018 right now, about to graduate, that'd be really cool, so I can get out any answers to those questions as soon as possible before you have to turn in your essays. Oh, by the way, I'm moving into Stanford in 6 days and I'm freaking out, so I'm gonna go pack. Thanks for watching. Bye.